She wrote me back the nastiest note about how I was a racist, bigoted Islamophobe, and the Turks were just mean and had nothing to do with Islam and so on. So
This episode is brought to you by our Revo Report Patreon. Join our community to get first access to interviews, Bible study guides, devotionals, and prayer books for adults, youth, families, and marriages. Plus, resources on Christian living, leadership, sermon prep, exclusive Q&As, online Bible studies, and even one-on-one coaching or counseling. Visit patreon.com/Vince Revo and grow in faith and truth with us. You mentioned your grandparents were forced to migrate from Turkey, right? Because they were Christians. In knowing that your family history, has that influenced at all your apologetics approach?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. It's influenced what I do to a tremendous degree because I was interested in what were the circumstances of their having to leave there. My grandmother always spoke about how much she loved it there and how beautiful it was and how happy she was growing up there. And I think, what a shame then that you had to leave. And so I wanted to know, led me to the study of Islam. But the approach, I don't know. It's a funny thing. In my experience, Greek Orthodox Christians generally tend to think the Turks are terrible and have been terrible to them, but they don't generally have any curiosity about why. And I find it very interesting that it's like the Turks, they're just mean. Well, I went deeper than that, and I don't think that's really the whole story there, but I generally find that there's not a whole lot of curiosity about that among Greek Orthodox Christians. Obviously, I'm trying to change that to some degree, but it's I don't know that. They came here. They held to their faith. It was very important to them. That impressed me a great deal as I was growing up, and they lived with us for a while. I would go into their part of the house, and there were all the icons and incense and so on. And this was not something that we had in the rest of the house. And I thought that was great stuff. And that may have influenced my love for the liturgy and for the Orthodox Christian faith. But in the apologetics approach, I don't know. I can't think of any particular connection there.
So my father-in-law is Greek Orthodox from Cyprus, and he was fighting in the war when the Turks came in the northern part of Cyprus, and the Cypriots, the Greeks, didn't have weapons at the time, and so they came in and almost took over the entire island. And so my father-in-law has vivid memories of some of the violence and atrocities that were committed there. But I feel like you're right. They've seen it. They've seen the atrocity. But like, where is this coming from? Where is this?
That's It's not a question that is asked. It's very strange. Now, to be sure, I told you before that a couple of Orthodox priests reached out to me at the time that I was returning to the Orthodox Church, and they were both very interested in educating their people about the Islamic jihad threat. And so there are notable exceptions to that. But I remember a woman who wrote a book, a very moving book about her grandparents being exiled from Turkey for maintaining their Christian faith. And I thought, this is just like my family. And I read the book and I thought it was very powerful and moving, and emailed her and explained who I was. She wrote me back the nastiest note about how I was a racist, bigoted Islamophobe and the Turks were just mean and had nothing to do with Islam and so on. So that unfortunately is a more common view among Greek Orthodox Christians.
I see. And in going to that for a moment, your critics have accused you of fostering Islamophobia, right? But on the other side, your supporters really praise you for your courage, like what we were talking about earlier. How do you balance speaking truth as you see it while also maintaining Christ's command to love your enemies? Because there's a fine balance there, isn't there?
Oh, I don't think it's a difficult thing at all. That's actually one of the easiest aspects of this, because I'm never my public image, at least among certain people, is so different from what I actually do. And I think that anybody who actually reads anything I write will see that, or sees any videos, that I don't hate anybody. I don't even hate the guys that have caused me a lot of personal harm that I referred to before. And I try to pray for them as often as possible, or as often as I think about it. The fact is that what I'm doing is illuminating things that I think are quite obviously true and easily provable. And I don't ever direct what I am saying against any individual or any particular group. There are many Muslims who are wonderful people, and this is something that I've acknowledged innumerable times, although I don't get a whole lot of credit for doing so if you read something like Wikipedia or something like that. But the fact I don't have any problem, because I know that this is something I've affirmed literally thousands of times, and this is something that I know to be true. And so loving someone does not mean being nice all the time in the modern 21st century sense. And that is, I mean, people think that to affirm somebody in their delusions or lies or falsehoods is love. And that's not what love is. Love is to speak the truth, to speak the truth even when it's inconvenient and offensive to some other people. There may be times when you are more muted about it than others, but there's not a time that it's ever appropriate not to speak the truth. And so it's a matter of love for Muslims to speak the truth about their religion and to call them to the actual truth, and to call them to Christ, to the church, to the Christian faith. This is not a matter of hatred in the slightest degree. And so when people say, oh, you're just full of hate, I think, well, you either have never read a thing that I've written or seen a video that I've done, or you're so blinded by your own ideology that you can't see the facts of the case. But there isn't any hate in telling the truth about this any more than there is in telling the truth about anything. One other thing about this, Vince, is that a lot of people say, just the other day I spoke out in Los Angeles, and this student from UCLA showed up where I was barred from speaking last year. And she said that there were people on the campus who were Muslims, who were Muslim women who were getting their hijabs torn off by Islamophobes. And I thought, that's not happening. And I thought, that UCLA, come on, not a chance. But okay, we'll take it at face value. And she blamed me and said that it's because I say that Islam is not a religion of peace and that Islam teaches warfare against unbelievers and so on. And I thought, this is one of the reasons why our colleges and universities are so worthless these days, that they teach this confusion. Speech is not violence. And I never called for anybody to tear off anybody's hijab. Quite the opposite. I've criticized people who've actually done those things in no uncertain terms. The fact is, though, that if it's happening, it's not happening because of people saying Islam doesn't teach peace, because Islam doesn't teach peace. To say that we can't speak the truth because somebody might take it and do something evil as a result, well, then we can't speak any truths anywhere. They are doing that because they think that that's the right thing to do, not because of anything I've said, but because somebody is saying that that is what ought to be done, somebody else, or because they are full of hate themselves. The answer to that is not to stop speaking the truth. The answer to that is to say that Islam doesn't teach peace. Islam has a doctrine of warfare, but that doesn't mean you should be discourteous or unkind or thuggish to anyone. And so if that needs to be said, then I'll say it. I have said it. I'll say it again. But the confusion between speech and violence, I think, accounts for a lot of the people thinking that what I'm doing is some terrible thing, because they think it will lead to violence against innocent Muslims. Well, I don't believe that's true. And also, that is not something that I call for. And so we have to understand that incitement is actually saying, go and do violence to people. But criticizing some ideology is not incitement. Otherwise, you couldn't criticize any ideology.